Hey, so we're finishing a series today called Swipe Right. Everybody say swipe right? And it's based off this idea well, there's an app. It's one of the more popular apps in our culture, and it's called Tinder. And on this app, which I do not encourage you to download and use, but if you swipe right and you think that person is good looking and they swipe right, then all of a sudden you make a fatal distraction rather than a faithful attraction. And so culture says, hey, good relationships, that person that's for you is all based on the surface, on the look, but God teaches us something very, very different. And so we have followed a love story that's, it's in Scripture. It's based out of the Song of Songs, also known as the Song of Solomon. And Solomon was the son of King David. He was the wealthiest and wisest man to ever live. He also had 300 wives and 700 concubines, so he swiped right quite a bit, and he had some wisdom to learn from, what to do and what not to do. And in the context of this story, this book is actually amazing. And this book was censored by the Christian church throughout different parts of history. And this book talks about the relationship of this boy and this girl, of this man and this woman. And as we've talked about these last few weeks, it's a love story where they saw one another and they had the explosive power of a new affection. How many of you remember as a little kid when you got new shoes, you felt like you could jump higher and you could run faster? Come on, do you remember that? But give it a little bit of time, a couple weeks later, those shoes were just like every other shoe. If we're not careful, our relationships can be that same way. They can be relationships that, man, they're awesome. Everything is awesome. And then all of a sudden, you get around them a little while and you're like, they're not really awesome, okay? And you realize that there's more to the surface and you're like, wow, they changed. And the reality was, they didn't change. You just stopped being blind. And we said this reality that lust leaps, but love looks. And when you make a decision to take a hard look at someone and not just see their perfections, but see their imperfections and value and understand who they are and who they're not, it's at that point that you finally have the maturity to enter into a relationship. Up until that point, you're all about the dream, but you're going to be shocked by reality. So we talked about this couple, man. They were head over heels in love. There's my lover. I love him. He's a young stag. I love her and her twin fawns of a gazelle. And they said, we're going to climb the palm tree. We're going to go into the vineyard. In other words, we're going to get it on, right? And so they had sex in this relationship. Everybody say great sex? So they meet, they get married, they have a great sexual relationship. And we said this last week, and I want to say it again, that if your passion and your goal is to have great sex for the rest of your life, you will be greatly disappointed because that person won't be enough. Multiple people won't enough. You'll enter in pornography, will deaden and kill your soul and your senses. And the reality is that great sex is a byproduct of a great relationship. And if you do the right things and build wisdom into your world to build a great friendship and relationship, then you will have great sex and you will enjoy that. But it's a byproduct and not the goal. Everybody say byproduct? Not the goal. And so we talked about this couple, this relationship that they had, encouraged one another, and they had great lovemaking experience, and everything was awesome in paradise. And then all of a sudden, let's get ready to rumble. Like every relationship known to mankind, you are going to have issues. So let's jump into it for a few moments, if you would. Let's look at 1 Corinthians 13. Let me read this to you. And this message that I've entitled, I love you to death. In other words, God has called you, if you're going to be married, to love that other person for as long as you both shall live. Now, no condemnation. You may have gone through divorce, going through, or somewhere in between. And the Bible speaks of divorce because it's a reality in a fallen and a broken world. But I want to challenge you today that you can have a love that will last a lifetime, but you're going to have to make a decision about a few things, and I want to unwrap that for a few moments. 1 Corinthians 13 says, Love is patient. It is kind. It does not envy, does not boast, it's not proud. It does not dishonor others. It is not self-seeking. It's not easily angered. It keeps no record of wrongs. Love does not delight in evil, but it rejoices with the truth. It always protects, always trusts, always hopes. It always perseveres. And love, it never fails. How many are like, man, I'm batting like 50% on that chapter right there. Like, I need to be more loving. Listen, the reality is each of us need to learn how to be more loving. The scripture says in Matthew chapter 5, let what you say be simply yes or no. Anything more than that comes from the enemy or the evil one. In other words, in our culture, we need to understand, especially in a relational reality, that we grow through our commitments, not to our commitments. And that's why God says, I want you to wait for sex until you're in a protected, committed relationship, because you'll never be more close to another human being on the planet, both intimately through your heart and also physically through your body, through the act of sexual intercourse. And so I want you to wait for that, because within that you'll be protected, it'll be blessed, everything is good. But when you do it outside of that, it'll cheapen it, it'll take something from you, and ultimately it won't satisfy it. And what happens in relationships is women give sex to connect emotionally, men give emotions to connect sexually. And that's why he won't marry you. Come on, it got really quiet in here in this service. Listen, I'm not backing away from this. You need to hear this. Listen, some of you have been engaged for like 10 years, okay? That's not an engagement. That's a hostage situation. You need to make a decision, okay, that, listen, if you're going to get married, then make the commitment and get married. But wait for sex. Well, if I stop, enter into a sexual relationship before marriage, then he will probably marry you. You'll probably get a ring next week. Come on, are you with me? That's just a reality. So if you will honor God and His standards, you will have the blessing of God, and it'll show up in your life and in your world. You guys are tough this morning, this crowd. Come on. Turn to your neighbor and say, I love the little preacher. I think he's a sweet little man. Now, if you had sex outside of marriage, nobody's condemning you. There's no judgment or any of those things. You just begin today to use wisdom and make the right things, because God desires to bless you and I. He wants to take our lives to a whole nother level. He just knows that we have a tendency to screw it up. And so, what causes fights? Let's look at this couple, man. Everything was good. Everything was awesome. And then all of a sudden, there is trouble in paradise. I slept, but my heart was awake. Chapter 5. Listen, my lover's knocking. Open to me, my sister, my darling, my dove, my flawless one. My head is drenched with dew, my hair with the dampness of the night. So she's sleeping, but she's not. She's laying there awake, and she's upset. She's mad. He doesn't understand me. He doesn't respect me. He doesn't love me. Or he would have been home at the time he would told me that he was going to be home. She's upset with him. And here comes Romeo later that night. She's asleep. He knocks on the door. Hey, baby. Cue. Last service I said Barry Manilow, which was funny, and I meant Barry White. I'm home. You're young stag. You're stud. I'm ready. It's time to go to the vineyard or whatever. It's time. Like, I'm ready to be with you. And then she replies, I have taken off my robe. And he's thinking, okay, that's a start. And then she says, must I put it on again? I've washed my feet. Must I soil them again? In other words, she's like, sorry, bro, I got a headache. Sorry, this is what, come on, are you with me? This is actually what is happening in this story. She's like, I'm sorry, I don't want to be with you. I'm offended at you. I'm upset with you. I'm annoyed with you. And then it goes on to verse 4, and it says, my lover thrust his hand through the latch opening. My heart began to pound for... So he's trying to open the door. I arose to open for my lover, and my hands dripped with myrrh. He had put romantic-smelling, good-smelling oil on the latch. He was trying to set the mood, but he thought she was upset. So he left. My fingers were flowing with myrrh on the handles of the lock. I opened for my lover. My lover had left. He was gone. My heart sank at his departure. Now, listen to what's happening here. He is knocking on the door, and she's like, go away. And then the next moment, she's like, hey, where's my man? And he's gone. See, when a man reads this, he looks at this and says, hey, give me a commentary. Give me like the original language. What's happening here? When a woman here reads this, she's like, yeah, that's right. She didn't want to be with him, and now she does. And for him, he's like, you didn't want to be with me, so I'm gone. She's like, well, why are you gone? So he's away. So he runs out, and we're going to jump through a couple verses, but what happens is he goes away. She runs out into the night. And she's ultimately, the Bible paints a picture that she's assaulted, that she experiences some relational wreckage as a result of those choices. And here's the reality in our lives, in our world. When we do not deal with unresolved conflict, it impacts and affects far more than you and I realize and more than what we think. It impacts and affects your day-to-day relationship. It impacts your children. And you have to make a decision that you're going to have to learn how to fight and learn how to fight fair. So we'll unwrap that for a few moments. But what causes us to fight? How about unmet expectations? Man, you saw that guy. He was so cute. You saw that girl. She was so beautiful. You're going to be happy forever. And you're together. And the honeymoon was great. Now you're working. Now you have kids. Now he's at work all the time. You're alone. You're working. There's no time for each other. When is he going to get home? He said he was going to be home an hour ago. It's 3 hours later. This is not what I signed up for. And if you've ever used that expression before, married people, I just want to tell you, it's exactly what you signed up for. People say, well, that's not what I signed up for. No, the truth is when you get married, you signed up for all of it. The good, the bad, and the sometimes ugly. You signed up for those things. But here's the reality. How do you deal with it? Well, you got to understand that our fights come from unmet expectations. See, you expect something from me. I expect something from you. When you're married, you expect something from that other person. Here's the deal. There's these unwritten rules. You thought like you talked about it, you communicated, but all of a sudden you're married and they squeeze the toothpaste from the top and you're like, who does that? Come on, somebody. All of a sudden they put the toilet paper so the roll's coming down the backside instead of over the top, and you're thinking they're raised by wolves. What else is going to happen? And then you realize that, hey, she expects you to take out the trash because that's what her dad did. And you expected her to mow the lawn because that's what your mom did. She's like, I ain't your mama. That didn't happen in my house. She said, well, then I ain't your dad. Take your own trash out. And then let's get ready to rumble, right? That's what happens. Unmet expectations. You and I, we have expectations of others. And within marriage, when those expectations are not met, well, bad things begin to happen. I heard about a lady that accompanied her husband to the doctor's office. And after his checkup, the doctor called the wife into the office alone and said, ma'am, your husband is suffering from very stress and his heart is weak. If you don't do the following few things for him, he's probably not going to make it. I would recommend that each morning you make sure you fix him a healthy breakfast. He's not getting the nutrients that he needs. Try to be as pleasant as you possibly can all the time. And for lunch, again, nutritious meal. For dinner, really make sure all the food groups go out of your way. Fix him that as well. Don't burden him with your problems. He's stressed, so you're just going to have to deal with them by yourself. It'll only make him more stressed out if you try to make him talk about it or you nag him about anything at all. And most importantly, I want to encourage you to make love to him consistently, multiple times a week, so he can really regain his health. Well, she came back out. They got into the car. And as they were driving along, the husband said, honey, what did the doctor say? She said, I'm sorry, honey. He said, you're going to die. See, here's the reality. We have expectations of others. We judge ourselves by our intentions. We judge others by their actions. And we need to make a decision that we're going to honor one another and not have excessive expectations that are unrealistic for the other person. Here's another thing that causes fights in our relationship. Selfishness. Everybody say selfish. Come on, out loud together. Say, I am selfish. Listen, we're all selfish. We all have issues. Come on. We all deal with this. And listen, if you say, man, I'm not selfish at all, I'm telling you, you have one big honking blind spot. You deal with this far more than you realize. And if you're not sure about your blind spots, God has given you your husband or wife to help you. They see what you don't see. Selfishness creates relational wreckage when we want it our way. I want it my way. Wow. And we fight. Now, when I talk about fighting, I'm not talking about being abusive. I'm not talking about yelling and screaming and all those different things. That's toddler behavior. Leave that to the 3-year-olds. But if you're an adult, I'm talking about, man, when we deal with these unmet expectations, we can get annoyed with one another and begin to act differently than God intends us to react. And then here's the big one, Pride. Pride. Don't tell me what to do. Yeah, you should go to counseling. I don't need it. Yeah, that's right. And that pride kind of wells up. And that person who used to be perfect now is completely imperfect. That relationship that used to be the dream now has become a nightmare. So how do you avoid that? Or how do you change that if you're in the midst of some of that right now? So I want to give you some wisdom. I want you to write it down, or if you're on the app, you can follow along. Those of you joining us online, come on, lean in with me for a few moments if you would. How do you fight fair? You're going to fight. And some people say, yeah, we don't fight. Okay, either you're going to fight one day at the divorce proceeding, or you're going to work through your issues as they come up little by little. Because, listen, the reality is as much as you love one another, we are fallen human beings. And we need to learn how to work through our issues. So you're going to be roommates, cellmates, or soulmates. You get to choose. And as you work through the issues, here's a big thing that you have to decide that you're going to do right now. Are you ready? This couple is fighting. They have had collateral damage as a result of their unwillingness to work through their issues. Bad things happen to her, and we'll come back to the relationship in a moment. But today, here's what you need to do. In any relationship in your world, but especially, everybody say especially? Especially in your marriage, you need to make a decision that you're going to act and not react. Say it with me. Act and not react. Come on, say it again. Act and not react. Man, that is easy to say, and that is so tough to do. Romans 12:21 says, do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So this is what you don't do. You don't say, hey, the Bible says that since you're evil, I should be good. Okay, it's not what you say to your spouse, but it's a reality that you should not blow something out of proportion because of stress going on in your life and in your world. So let me give you an example from my life on this, a recent example. My wife, who is amazing, she's an incredible woman of God, and I love her, but she's imperfect and I'm imperfect. As much as we love one another and we get along really well, side note, if you're dating and you fight all the time, that's a terrible sign, and you probably shouldn't get married, because if you have a crack in the foundation and you add 1,000 pounds to it, the crack just gets bigger. Marriage will just give you more of what you have when you're dating. Come on, are you awake this morning? And so, listen, if you fight all the time and you're dating, they may be good to you, but they're probably not good for you. It might be time to kind of move it along. But if you're in the context of a marriage, when you said I do, that person became God's chosen person for you, the perfect person that God has for you. And in that covenant, God wants you to learn how to act and not react. So my wife and I, we were out of town just a couple weeks ago. We were at this really nice place that meetings that we were attending were being held. And it was kind of a she hotel and restaurant and ballroom. And I said, hey, let's go get something for the kids. And it's one of those places that you just take the complimentary pens because everything else is too expensive. You know what I'm talking about? And so we went to the store and we were looking around. I'm like, I am not spending $50 for a T-shirt. I love my kids, but we all have our limits, right? Okay, we can get them something else. And I like to get my family things when I go away. So when I return, they just, my kids celebrate. My wife's happy. Everything's good. And so she was with me. I said, well, let's look around. We looked around. We couldn't find anything. And I said, well, I saw a bag of chocolates over there, and they're kind of special for the hotel. And I said, maybe we should get those. Why don't you go look at them? Now, I'm convinced that I said, go look at the price. She's convinced that I said, that I took care of that, and she just went to get them. In fact, she's so convinced, she texted me that as I was driving over to our other location just to remind me from the first service. And so we got up to pay for everything, and the lady said, I believe it was, $20-some. And I said, excuse me? How much was the chocolate? She's like, oh, that was $20. I said, oh. I looked at Michelle. I said, did you know that was the price of that? Because it wasn't Godiva chocolate. Come on, I'm a chocolate connoisseur. I know what I'm paying for it. And I said, are you sure? Like, you know that? And she's like, well, yeah, no, that's. She's like, basically, I thought that you. And I'm like, I thought that. And ladies standing there like you are sitting there. It's like really awkward. I'm like, okay, yeah, great. Okay, we'll just get it. And so we paid for it. We're walking away, and I'm like, I thought you checked the price. She's like, I thought you checked the price. And I said, I'm so annoyed. Come on, married people, are you with me? Come on. My wife looked at me. She's like, you don't have to be annoyed. And I thought, baby, I love you to death. I love you. And I thought for a moment I had this annoyance because I'm thinking, man, I didn't want to spend that money for that and that crappy chocolate. Now I want to take it back, and you should have looked, and I'm blaming her, and I'm taking no blame on myself, and I'm making a big deal out of chocolate when we're away and hanging out and have a great time and no kids. Come on, somebody. And I'm almost ruining the moment over $20 of chocolate. And I took a step back. And I thought to myself, don't be a stupid man. And I said, you're right, I don't have to be annoyed. It's all good. And we went, and we had a great day. We had a great rest of our trip, and it was fantastic, and it was amazing because I made a decision to act and not react. Say it again. Act and not react. My reaction would have been wrong, self-centered, self-serving. And really pretty silly in the grand scheme of things. Can you imagine? When we're dating, everything's great, we're awesome. Hey, 21 years from now, I'm going to get so mad at you because we spent a few dollars more for chocolate that I'm going to fight with you, and I'm going to ruin an entire weekend. Doesn't that sound awesome? We'd want to travel back in time and punch our younger, you know what I'm saying? Or travel forward, you get the picture, okay? Act and not react. I just want to ask you a question. Is there someone in your world that you say that you love, but you're acting really annoyed at them consistently because of unmet expectations, because of pride, because of selfishness? Are there people in your family that you say that you love, but you're doing anything but showing them that love? Maybe today it's time to make a change. I want to encourage you, act and not react. Here's the next one. Write this down. So important. Focus on the good and not the bad. Now, I am a critiquer. It's one of the things that makes me a pretty good leader. It also is one of the things that can make me an annoying person to be around. I noticed the little things, and the little things can get under my skin. And sometimes I'll come home, and I'll notice that the kids haven't cleaned up like they're asked, and I don't walk into the house, hey, I missed you, hey, guys. I walk in and say, hey, come on, you know the deal. Go clean your room. Go clean that up. I worked all day. I don't want to come home to, this messy, dirty house because you didn't take 5 minutes. Let's be honorable. Pick it up. Do your stuff. Come on. Clean the house. And then the tone is set for the rest of the night. But what if I'd come home and I'd say, you know what? Hey, guys, how you doing? I missed you. Good day. What happened in your day? Awesome. Hey, we're going to eat in a few minutes. Make sure after dinner that you just clean up all that stuff that we'd agreed to, and then we'll have a great night together. Now, which reaction do you think is better? The one that focuses on the negative or appreciates and focuses on the positive? See, I confess to you that I can be the person that focuses on the negative far more than I would ever want to acknowledge or say. But I suggest that you may be that person as well. I sit with a lot of people, and I've sat in a lot of counseling sessions over the last 20 years. And if you were to come to me and we were to sit down together and you had issues, your beginning would not be talking about all the things that you love and appreciate about that person. Because you're there because you've stopped looking at the things that you appreciate and that you love about that person. And you have zeroed in, you have focused on all the things that you can't stand. And the issue is never the issue. Let me say that again. The issue is never the issue. See, the issue isn't simply they relate, simply this, simply that. The issue is that we've stopped honoring one another in our relationship, and that dishonor always brings devastation and relational wreckage to every area of our lives. And when we do that, what happens is things begin to spin out of control when we begin to focus on the bad instead of the good. And here's the deal. The reality is this, is not that that person does bad all the time. It's the fact that somewhere in your heart there is brokenness and pain that is unresolved. And there's a wound that you have not allowed the Spirit of God to heal, to forgive, and to restore. And you keep living your life looking through that wound. And as long as you keep looking through that wound, that spouse, that child, that family member, that person you work with, you'll see negative. Why can't people get it? Why are people crazy? Why is everyone else bad and I'm the only person that's good? See, the problem isn't that everybody else is bad. It's because you haven't dealt with what's been bad in your soul and what's been done to you. And the moment that you say, God, heal me, forgive me, Spirit of God, make me new, it's in that moment that He begins to heal us on the inside, that we can see life for the way that it is instead of the way that we are. I want to invite you and I want to challenge you to make a decision to focus on the good and not the bad. A great example of this is one of my favorite heroes of the faith. His name is Billy Graham. They were interviewing his wife, Ruth, about what it was like when her husband was gone for sometimes up to 7 months out of the year. They were expecting her to talk about how difficult it was and all those different things, and it would be. And this is not a story I'm telling you to somehow be good with your workaholic husband that's ignoring your family, because he wasn't doing that. But she replied this amazing reply. She said this. She said, 5 months of being with Billy is better than 12 months of being with any other man. She made a decision that she was going to look for the good. How would your relationship with your husband or wife change today if you started seeing the good? You started celebrating the good. You started honoring the good. I'm not saying you don't have conflict and deal with the bad. I'm just saying that you don't pretend that that's all that you have. What would happen in your life and in your world if you made a decision that you were going to talk and not walk? My wife and I, we've made this commitment in our marriage. And so far, so good. It's just you and me, that's all it's going to be. There's no plan B. And divorce will never be mentioned in our home. We said it's like an F word. We don't drop those bombs in our homes. It's not how we communicate. It's not how we talk. It's not how we treat one another. Divorce is not an option. There's no plan B. And when you don't have a plan B, it's amazing what you can do. When you say, you know what, we're in this for the rest of our lives. I love you to death. You'll be amazed at how good your marriage can be. What you can overcome in your life and in your world. My parents will celebrate 51 years of marriage, and I've been alive for 44 of the 50. And we looked at their lives, and we celebrated them last year with 50 years. And I remember things not going well. I remember bad seasons. I remember negative times in their relationship where I wondered as a kid, man, I don't know if they're going to make it. But I look at them now in the latter part of their lives where they say, I love you to death, and they care for one another, and they're committed For as long as they both shall live. And those things that seemed so big years ago, they were so stressed out about that purchase or that issue or that comment and all those things. Listen, it's nothing. It's barely even a memory today. I thank God that they made a commitment. Because the greatest gift that they've given me is for as long as they both shall live. No condemnation. If you've been through a divorce and pain and all, I don't know your situation, and I'm not judging you at all. I'm just saying for your life and your next step and your world and your future, make the commitment to talk and not walk, to work it out and not walk out. Song of Psalms chapter 6 says, I went down to the grove of nut trees to look at the new growth in the valley. Before I realized it, my desires set me among the royal chariots of the people. Come back, O Shulamite. Come back to me. They were forgiving one another. They were loving one another. Their relationship was being restored despite their conflict. You're going to have conflict, but here's what you need to know. Conflict is the pathway to intimacy. As you work through your conflict, the deeper your relationship will grow. If you won't work through your conflict, you'll never be vulnerable, so you'll never have intimacy. Intimacy. But if you'll humble yourself and you'll ask God to help you, not be prideful, not be all about your expectations, not be selfish, then you'll have an opportunity to have an amazing relationship and a great marriage. Chapter 8, verse 6, place me like a seal over your heart, like a seal on your arm. For love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like blazing fire, like a mighty flame. So at one point they're mad, don't come near me, don't touch me, I have a headache, fine, I'm out of here, I don't want to talk to you anyway. And then they come back and like, man, I've missed you. Man, I love you. Man, like a seal in my heart, I want to love you, I'm going to be with you all of my days. Commitment. You don't grow to your commitments, you grow through them. You make the commitment, and then you say there's no plan B. And when you do that, everything in your world begins to grow. I want to challenge you as we close to make a decision to make these commitments. Genesis chapter 2, verse 24 and 25 says this. For this reason, a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and they'll become one flesh. The man and his wife were both naked, and they felt no shame. Said you need to leave your father and mother. Means you're closest to that person that you're married to. Love your family, but have boundaries. If you have conflict, it's between you and your spouse and maybe a counselor if you can't work it out. Not between you and your girlfriend, you and your guy friends, you and your mom, you and your mother-in-law. No. If you want to kill a marriage and a relationship, keep dishonoring each other in that way. But when you're married, you're closer to that person than any other person on the planet. Physically, emotionally, relationally, and that person has to trust that you are their number one fan and you're in it together forever. I love you to death. And when you have that type of commitment, love can flourish. But you have to make a decision to loosen, to relinquish, to let go of what you're holding, to commit to something new. Meaning you leave and you make that person a priority. You commit to pursuing them. Pursuit is proof of passion. You don't say, I do and I love you, and then all the years go by and say, well, I didn't change my mind. I didn't feel like I needed to tell you. No. Every day you're telling them, you're blessing them, you're encouraging them. You're not leaving any room for the enemy to come in and those needs to be met anywhere else. You're becoming the person that God has designed just for them. Pursuit is proof of passion. Scripture says that you'll be united to your wife. That word means to cling, to adhere to catch by pursuit. Here's the last commitment I want you to encourage or decide to make as we close this series. That you make a commitment to partnership. And they will become one flesh. United together. Completely joined as one. A cord of 3 strands is not quickly or easily broken. Make a decision that your marriage will be about we and not me. Not about all of your needs, not about all of your desires, not about everything going your way, but about you saying, you know what? I love you. Now remember, that person is not called to complete you. Because what you say in the dating relationship, you complete me. In the marriage relationship, you'll say, you completely drive me crazy. Because here's the deal. In God's mathematical equations, 1 + 1 = 1. When you're whole, when you're healed, when you're ready, and you find another person in that way, then you become one. But when you're only half the person that you need to be, it'll rob you of that oneness. So stop looking for Mr. or Mrs. Better Half or Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, and you say, I need to become who God has called me to be. So I'll attract the person I want to be with, and then through my failures, through my weaknesses, through my difficulties, through my miscommunication, through my desire to fight over $20 chocolate, I will love them and I'll be with them for as long as we both shall live. Hey, thanks for tuning in to our online experience. It's our prayer that you experience the hope and the freedom in life that only God has to offer. I want to encourage you to take some next steps. Take what you've heard, put it into practice. We want to help you with that. Go ahead and email us at hope@freedom.life, and we'll help you with that next step. Thanks again for tuning in. Have a great week.